thank you for this interesting, a little grim introduction of our region, but realistic one, that's for sure. I will talk about what we do at the Imagine Center of Conflict Transformation and the importance we attach to people-to-people diplomacy, to initiatives that happen on the ground, actually by youth, because there's so much emphasis placed in young people, both in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Imagine Center was created in 2007, and it stands for bringing together young people from Armenia and Azerbaijan once a year. It's for a dialogue retreat. And what Imagine does is, when they bring together these young people, the most important thing is talking about history. Because we believe that if you don't talk about history and you actually try to do something, you don't get to the basics. You don't get to talk about the reality of the situation. And so we've developed a methodology for a 10-day dialogue retreat. Then when we talk about the history, we basically ask the sides to come up with a chronology of events that they think were important in some way affecting the relations between the two countries, the conflict itself. And you usually get a very harsh kind of methodology of very important events, very important dates in the history of both the countries. But what's really important is that once you come up with that methodology, you need to explain basically why you have those dates in there. And what we ask each of the participants to do is to go over each of the historical data that they provide, why they think it's important, why they think it has affected the relations between the two countries. And at the end of the second day, when the two sides get to actually say things that they rarely get a chance to say to the other person or to the other side, they realize that they have very distinct history or very distinct past that's been taught to them in very different ways. And what we try to do is, having shown what the sides think of the other, what they perceive of the other, is to offer them some kind of a platform or an option to understand the position, which is really important, but then seek ways of looking into cooperation or discussing joint projects. Of course, history evaluation is not the only thing that we do during the dialogue retreat. We also attach a lot of importance to discussing the present day concerns, present day fears, but also hopes for the future and what can be done realistically. And then at the end, once we've kind of gone over these details, we ask them to brainstorm on different ideas that they can collaborate on. And it's not necessarily always something that could be done in parallel. Sometimes there are individual projects that also make a lot of sense. And once we have a lot of different ideas, we sit down together again and either group them so that we can actually fulfill all of them, or come up with 3 to 4 projects that we can support and help them to develop. As a result, I think one of the best outcomes of the program was an online publication that was suggested by the participants called Caucasus Edition. It's a policy journal, and it's basically a way to give an opportunity to academicians, to diplomats, to analysts, to write about Karabakh from different views, from different aspects, and analyze the war. And it's always done in parallel. So if we have someone writing from Azerbaijan, we'll always have an article by someone from Armenia. Sometimes we have foreign writers, which is always an interesting input into the whole debate. And we continue with the publication. Last year we launched the Russian version of the publication because we realized, if you write in English, there's only a certain number of people that you can actually reach out to. So we've been translating the articles that have been published prior launching the Russian version. And last year, during the dialogue retreat, we had an interesting suggestion that we start up a new platform for younger people to share and talk about things that are dear to them. Talking about education, issues in, for example, education system that they have in both of the countries, or even come up with parallel stories that they could publish on, environment or holidays, traditions, and things as such. And so that publication is called Nurture Zone, actually that was mentioned earlier, that I'm editing. It's been going really well because we have a group of very amazing writers and contributors from both Armenia and Azerbaijan, and they're very keen on exploring possibilities. We've started up doing more of a multimedia work where they publish parallel photo stories from both cities. We've done several videos, and you can always log into the websites or look for them on YouTube. And I think, we've been criticized every once in a while, both with me and my counterpart from Armenia, saying that, you can't talk about history, or you can't really, bridge the gap between the two communities, especially among the young people. But we always argued that, once you get to the basics of the conflict, once you actually give an opportunity to people to talk, to speak their minds, to share their fears, to share their concerns, there's always a chance, you plant a seed that will eventually, in one way or another, sooner or later, give some kind of results. And that's where we've been thinking of expanding, and we did. We kind of shifted, now that we've attracted diplomacy, we decided to do track 1.5.
I don't know where this is coming from. Can somebody make this stop? Thank you.
So yes, back to diplomacy. So we've been doing track 2. This is the most of the imagined work, but then in 2009 we started doing track 1.5, which is bringing together people from the government who do talks and dialogues on the official level with the people who do track 2, so civil societies or journalists or even bloggers. So far we've had 4 meetings, which were quite interesting because normally you would think that as a track 2 person that, probably they don't really care about you, the work that you do, but surprisingly they've been very supportive. In fact, I think during one of the first meetings, an official from Azerbaijan was very touched by the initiative, and he was very pushing to continue. And so we're continuing doing track 1.5. We're hoping that something fruitful will come out of it eventually. But what we realized is that you cannot have something successful if you do it once a year. What we realized is that you have to really do this on and on basis to keep it going, because otherwise, once you meet, you come together, you talk, you have amazing projects, but then once you go back, it's very hard to keep it up. And so it's been a very interesting development process, just looking at expanding the network, seeing people get involved. And I think right now at this very stage, especially because of all this media propaganda and states' harsh rhetorics, both in Armenia and Azerbaijan, we see how much importance it is to actually continue this, people-to-people diplomacy, to have them, to have people involved and discover initiatives as imagined, because there are other attractive initiatives that are done in the region, bringing together people from different backgrounds, and it's a very challenging process, because there's always there will always be someone who will come up to you and say, whatever you're doing, you shouldn't be doing, because we know everything, you're completely wrong, forget about what you're doing. And it's very common. It's something that's happening every time we do a discussion that's open to media or at other events. But again, you kind of have to stay positive and stay motivated, because when I go back to my work and I look at the people I've met through Imagine, all these young minds who are very interested in doing work together, it's always kind of, it makes you feel really good. Right? It makes you also feel hopeful that having these kind of individuals is a really big plus. Do I have a little bit? Okay, well, there are a few of the things that we're planning to do. Let me talk about what we plan to do. We're now thinking of launching a dialogue program for journalists, working both in Armenia and Azerbaijan, because as I said earlier, there's a lot of negative rhetoric in the media. Of course, having media controlled by the government also means that if you bring journalists from these countries together, you kind of educate propaganda to write better propaganda. So it's very tough and challenging to also select a journalist who will be interested and actually ready to write differently. We're thinking of working with bloggers because this has been a new development. We've just finished the project with International Alert. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this organization. It's a civil society based in the UK. And they've just finished this project on myths and conflicts. And it's not just in Armenia, Azerbaijan, but it takes in Abkhazia, Ossetia, Georgia, Russia. And there were different groups doing different research, and I was on the part that was doing the research on the blogosphere. And I have to say, I was not just frustrated, but it was also very sad to read some of the things that were written on these blogs, because as part of the selection process, we picked the blogs that were very strong in their language towards the other, and how they portrayed the enemy, thus creating myths about the enemy. Some of the expressions used, some of the rhetoric, it wasn't just strong, it wasn't just about hate, it was just a clear kind of message that, you know, we are better than you, you don't deserve to be there, you deserve to be completely wiped out. And this is, I'm giving you a nice picture of what came out of this research. And so we decided to perhaps do a dialogue retreat for bloggers as well, because, you know, if this is also happening in the online world, it means that, and it's happening, a lot of those writers are young people, you know, they're 25, 26, 27, perhaps even younger authors who are, you know, if this is how they think now, how are they going to think in 5 or 10 years with continued propaganda that they get from the state, TV, and the public speeches. Of course, a lot of the other groups that did media study, they did studies of public speeches given by the political leaders. They also had similar results, especially in Armenia. There was a lot of kind of this, you know, I'm your, it's not, it's, you're basically, again, you know, I'm better than you type of thinking. That it showed how little is really, how little positive things are actually happening within the people's minds, and how everyone is actually looking into more negative. And there's also a challenge whenever you think in a different way, whenever you think that I should start a dialogue, I should, you know, take the first step, you always get criticized that, you know, how could you be sitting at the same table in the same room with your enemy? And it's important right now at this stage to start working on breaking that kind of stereotypical understanding of the other, because at the end of the day, the conflict has drawn so many perhaps old friends and families apart that right now, you know, any kind of initiative on the civil society, on the personal level, is very important, especially if we want to contribute to the overall results of the conflict. And hopefully, once the conflict is resolved, there will be already a group of individuals who have done considerable amount of work within this sphere, and who are actually willing to take this further. Is there